monstrous proposal. Create the scariest story ever told. Grandiose in scale and nearly impossible in execution. Yet here I sit, at the site of immeasurable loss and suffering. One would imagine the feeling of being here now was no different than then. Deterioration means nothing that is superficial. What I speak of rots from within the soul. Like all horrors, the greatest threats always come from within. White halls fade to yellow and even black, signaling the loss of innocence that embodies the soul of this sinister structure. Within shattered memories resides the will of malice, willing and waiting to siphon hope from the well of humanity. Dilapidated iron litter the floor in a dominant display of loss that channels the purest form of dread, used to ink my quivering quill. In the breath of misery lies an ever-darkened sanctuary of wrath's remembrance. In this place, this dreaded place, I sit and wallow in the bowels of self-reflection. Happiness and comfort are the diseases that I purge. As to why, one could determine it spawned from a lifetime of death and failure. A failure to save the lives of those I held dear, as they stretched out their arms and screamed my name. Fear gripped their mind as my name lingered upon their lips. Guilt stained the Holy Spirit as I came to a punishing conclusion. I deserve to suffer for my failings. Love, comfort, satisfaction, and peace will never be accepted. I will not feel these because they cannot feel these. Deprivation is my weapon. No sleep, no food, no love, no hope. Love is a particularly potent weapon. Rejecting the healing touch of love is a very specific type of pain, a very potent pain. Her presence washes it all away. The hope and the optimism gained must be purged. Repression is the syringe that poisons my soul. Why all these horrid acts? It is a reflection of the area in which I dwell. Here is the abandoned jail. Many were drawn, and all dissolved into madness. Local legend states that only the broken are drawn here. Fulton County Jail. Built in the early 1900s, the jail was used to house those who wandered the streets, crazed and wild. These souls were locked away in a large holding cell. The inmates all recount seeing an apparition walking through the jail. They say it was no ghost, but an avatar of sorts. It was described as several jagged broken limbs, intertwined in one another, with a red glow that permeates the aura of death. Buzzing sounds were heard all throughout the jail. Supposedly, it still lingers in the area. The site is now home to hundreds of bizarre accounts, ranging from suicide to mass immolation. Perhaps this is the cause of my horrid musings of self-destruction. What lingers here feels more like a consciousness than an actual entity. And from what I can gather, it is leaps and bounds from any horror I have ever experienced. As I walk across the area, I stumble over a lump of black soil. Taking the initiative, I began to dig, unveiling several large bones. The project had to be put on hold due to the intervention of authorities. My inquiries into the recovered bones were ignored. Several weeks later, I returned to the crumpled jail. Upon my re-entry, I feel a homecoming of sorts. As stated before, only the broken are drawn here. Inside and out, I am afraid I am so. It is within these broken walls that I pen the Pages of Rembonte, a reflection of the events that revolved around the attempt to create the scariest story ever told. Writing the story here could be criticized. This locale is far from the scariest I have visited, but it is the most draining. An indescribable aura permeates the area. I opted for an entity of unknown origin that spawns from fear's most foreign dimensions. Ink of sullied guilt pens this terror tale. I have found that horror lies not only in atrocity, but regret and memory as well. My most haunting memories are abducted from the prison I have placed them in, and flaunt it before me as self-hatred becomes the weapon of my demise. It is with this horrible energy that I open the gates to my stagnant imagination. Here in this loathsome place, another came to escape the pain of rancid love. His name was Clarence Ranglease. Leaving his family in a state of abandonment, Clarence was drawn here, in his own words, by an outward force booming from dimensions unscathed by human consciousness. After this, Clarence climbed to the top of the Omnius jail and leaped into an adjacent crater, impaling himself on the protruding rebar. He failed to die on impact, dying several hours later, all while ranting and railing about the outward voices. It is in this area I choose to pen tonight's horror. Without further ado, I present to you the Pages of Rembonte. It may take considerable effort and egregious tolerance, but as much as it haunts me, I shall recount these horrific events. Why does it haunt me so? Will you ever leave me? My memories are nothing more than a roost for your evil. The screams, the breaking bones, the hatred, the horrific loss of life's splendor, I shall never forget. Whomever shall find these writings, be warned, for in this story lies a sinister suggestion. One inclement afternoon, my colleagues and I set out to do something no one had done before. Create a story riddled with subliminal messaging, contrived to fill the mind with fear, to infect the heart with dread. Our efforts were more than successful. We partnered with psychologists, neuroscientists, behavior specialists, and historians of horror and literature to help create the most terrifying story ever told. Horror works in a very unique way when compared to other genres of literature. To induce fear, one must prey on the audience's sensibilities and pull the tension as far as possible while maintaining interest and intrigue. Every step was meticulously calculated, from the wording, lettering, sentence structure, even the placement of paragraphs and punctuation marks. In our profound ignorance, we overlooked the power of the human mind, and even more frightening, the cause of its manipulations. We were warned by religious leaders to not indulge in such practices, but we underestimated the power of the human mind. After 1 year and 7 days, the dreaded story was at last complete. First, we elected to test the literature on a student to see if we could instill fear. We instilled much, much more than that. During the reading, the student remained calm with only minor changes in behavior and his heart rate, but after is where the true terror occurred. Moments after finishing the story, the student began talking nonsensically and violently attacked several members of our staff. It took the force of 8 men to restrain him. A month later, he attacked and killed a fellow classmate, stabbing him 11 times. Prior to this, the student had no history of violent behavior. Against our greater judgment, we decided to proceed with the project. The violent, impulsive behavior of one student was not our fault or concern. We prepared a secret screening of the story at a remote locale in the attic of the Pages Rembonte Theater. Before the proceedings, a nightmarish reluctance took hold of us. Once again, we foolishly persevered. The subliminal messaging in the story was meticulously looked over by myself and others, the contents of which were seemingly written from the darkest recesses of our minds. No matter how much we resisted, the messaging seemed to be drawn from the darkest and most ancient of evils, from the farthest of dimensions, from the most foreign portion of the human psyche. And once invoked, seemed to draw the readers into the same aforementioned hell. If I had known the terror that would befall us, I would have never organized such a horrid event. Their eyes still haunt me. They trusted us for an evening of entertainment, and we repaid them by sending them into the abyss. Many of us working on the project experienced bizarre visions and intrusive thoughts, but told no one until after the chaos. Within the lettering of the story, lay sinister symbols and invocation rites placed by a powerful force working through our subconscious. We did not know what we wrought. The sinister lust of nightmares that penetrated into the recesses of darkness, or a frightful birth of evil that would haunt us into the end of our days. Pages of Rembonte, the viewing palace of the elites. Its splendor hid horrid malice in plain sight. Architecture dating back to early 19th century, Gothic luxury is the structure the theater is built upon. Upon chiseled stone, pointed and gray, lined with black stout iron, with hugs hand-dug, and crescents that stand adorned with vibrant red velvet and gold lining, stare blankly into the golden pews and grand stage. The night before the reading, I was haunted by grotesque visions of evil. Just as I awakened, my body felt as if an invisible talon was forcing me in place. I began to scream, but my fear was soon muffled by the sight of a wild-haired apparition. Straggly and withered, the hair seemed to float upward as dark-faced, gray-eyed creatures leered from the middle. What appeared to be a head emerged with the skull slit down the middle, revealing the most gruesome of sights. Rotating in the skull was a bone-like material that sent gore and ganglia spewing forth from the wound as the creature chuckled in delight at their torturous condition. I told no one of the previous night's events out of fear of being ostracized and treated as an eccentric. Dawn's beaming light covered the landscape in a charlatan vision of hope as I made my way to Pages of Rembonte. During the drive, I felt a sense of separation as I sped toward the dreaded theater. Crowds were anxious and excitable, but overall calm and controlled. Waves of confusion and dread washed over me as I seemed to watch the events from far ahead. The sensation soon vanished, and I saw the world at a first-person perspective, just as the audience were being seated. Ultimately, it was I who penned the tainted letters, thus it should be I to read them. After thanking those in attendance for their time, I began the story. Words of sinister damnation entered their ear and drilled a hole straight into the depths of hell's most sinister secrets. Their eyes were stiffened and pure, as if made of marble and painted with blood. Red as the setting sun, they stared a hole through me. With a mere blink, all was returned to normal. Even with these bizarre distractions, I never lost my cadence. It appeared some unknown force was guiding my lips. It felt as if I were my own puppeteer. Was it I who sought malice and death? Surely not. No. It could not be me. I could not conceive such evil, but it could. Whatever this beast is that has stolen my image like a predator steals chastity, must be molding me into its dark, craven image. I began to feel the sensation of an out-of-body experience. I was peering through my eyes, reading the story, while simultaneously standing at my side, leering into the audience, damning them into eternity. It was then that the calamity happened. I must take a moment to gather myself. Hysteria ran rampant through the audience as their anger grew. Then, with a sudden burst of violence, overtook the theater. Writhing in an entanglement of orgy of violence, the audience began attacking one another with visceral anger that only Satan himself would envy. Smack! Crack! I vividly remember the sound of her skull being crushed. My God. My two-person perspective continued as I watched a young lady be thrown to the ground, and several members of the audience leap off the ground and land with both feet on the poor woman's cranium. Convulsions and gagging followed as she seized until death. Red, velvet, and blue. I watched in horror as several members of the audience strangled one another. Sons killed mothers, fathers battered daughters, husbands assaulted wives. Their destruction knew no bounds. Slunk. Flesh was carved and mutilated as the sound of pierced flesh echoed through my shaking ear. Reddened eyes and gurgled language plagued the audience members as my second perspective transformed into a colossal entity adorned in green linens with shadow and sunken eyes beneath a shroud of anger, anchored by a tale of battered souls screaming into the abyss. As horrific as it may sound, I still found myself bound to this foul creature's perspective. Children were slammed against the concrete floor, sinking their skulls and swelling their heads. The distinct sound of pounding flesh skulks into the alleyways as the audience beat one another to death in a vibrant display of pain. Aban Birith! This bizarre word was shouted routinely, as if giving the mob strength. Shock and awe overtook me as the theater shook with hellish intent. The entity, for all intents and purposes, seemed only visible to me. All others seemed either unable to see it or oblivious to its presence. Several lay dead and dying as legions are trampled and mashed as eyes popped from their sockets and scalps lay hanging from bloody fibers in a fearsome display of evil. Torturous legions of eternity strangling void mock and shame me into a paralysis-ridden stupor. The carnage went on for what felt like an eternity, until finally, with a sudden jolt, the violent display just ended. Cries of shock, horror, dread, and loss fill the theater. Many cradle their loved ones, as others run in terror, whilst most stand in shock at their horrid actions. Memories of the event change depending on who is asked. Most will not speak of it. As for me, I write my accounts in this memoir and record them on record, and shall write no other. In all, 36 people lay dead and 20 are injured. Ostracized from society, I live in hiding, along with the dreaded tale I have written. I humbly ask a favor, pray with me, that the cursed tale is never uncovered. Flames engulfed the pages last I saw them, but it remains in the mind of all in attendance. Pray with me, my friend, that it is never rewritten.